This will be a rather difficult video for me linguistically. I would like to talk in it about a topic that uh, is basically on the everyday agenda of modern societies. Um, but I would like to start with a short introduction that generally clarifies my take and my position within my take on and my position within controversial topics, very controversial and loaded topics that move the society currently, or at least some of them, probably all of them. Throughout the history, there were always people who really genuinely tried to objectively understand and figure out every stance and every position. Not necessarily for the sake of those positions, but rather with the curiosity uh, of an honest inquiry into how this world actually works. And sometimes by those people, there was a sense of disharmony governing the world mixed in, guided by which they just tried to find the harmonical way for people and different stances to coexist, at least to find such a way in their mind. And this is more or less what I'm about to engage in for such a few topics that actually do not admit definite answers, but rather require, if we want to be completely honest honest about them, honest is a systematic way that takes the whole world into our um, realm of the view, then we would just admit that we have to see the whole picture, or at least it is my take. So, my presentation is even though it might seem like that because the arguments of different stances are more likely, I'm not actually talking about particular arguments, or I guess I don't. I'm hovering on a much more general levels of thinking usually, but well, whatever it might seem to anyone, my talk can only be regarded as a whole with all the points brought in it, and no particular point is allowed to be perceived by per se. It is only allowed to be perceived in the whole context of the talk. So, if you are incapable of perceiving my talk as a whole, with all the controversial and maybe contradicting each other points that I will bring up, then, well, then you are just incapable of having an attention and an, what should I call it, thinking span sufficient to understand what I'm actually presenting. And so you shouldn't be actually objectively allowed to categorize in your mind this video or this talk in any way. And I'm just talking objectively, and it doesn't matter at all if you would support my video or if you would hate it. It doesn't matter at all what your reaction is, what your own stance is, what your own position is, what category you belong to. It does not matter at all, absolutely. And I mean by that, not just those categories that you are having in your mind, that it doesn't matter that one doesn't belong to it. No, I'm talking about all categories, absolutely. Because this is the level my talk sets in. And this is the level where it is going to uncover. Okay, being a human being, I'm of course not intellectually flawless, so I might forget some aspects. Then, before you are trying to frame me in a category known to you, if you will even try that, I think what I'm about to say will be stand out in multiple ways, so it's hardly likely, but if, then you should just ask if I really mean what you think I mean, instead of supposing it. Because this is the first demand for a person who is actually interested in genuinely understanding other people. And if you are not trying to genuinely understand other people, how could you have a hope that others will try to understand your own position? It wouldn't make any sense, because if it is not mutual, why would other people even try to understand your position? So why? Okay, I lost this thread of thinking. Um, why would you suppose that it would be a thing that would be naturally present in this world? So, if you are not trying to understand what I'm trying to say, but instead are trying to put me anywhere, whoever you are, because I will certainly say things that will contradict, well, any group and any opinion that is not at the same level of total neutrality. Of It goes even further than neutrality. I'm not proclaiming neutrality. I'm proclaiming more like a trial of a pursuit to get to the core of all the things we observe in those particular topics that I will talk about, to get to this core in a very systematic and a very general way that just tries to get to the surface why people are actually reacting in ways they are reacting. Of course, the presented material will be just my thoughts. It won't be a final say or anything of that sort. But yeah, I think it will contradict a lot of things that anyone might be thinking or perceiving something as, uh, because, well, that's our world. Our world is just self contradictory. And if you are trying to capture all aspects of some topic, you must get into self contradictions, because it is not a slim mathematical theory where there are no contradictions by design. in our world, there are a lot of contradictions just by nature of it, especially when we view it through a prism of human perception. Because human perception itself is contradictory. That human perception is contradictory, you can discover in very much everyday settings. For example, by your decision making, you have probably noticed that you might just have mixed feelings that actually contradict each other. And that gets reflected in your decision process. You might be torn between two alternatives. And of course, it gets projected into deeper layers of the subconscious. So that your subconscious is actually intrinsically self contradictory. When we create systems that are rigorous and precise, what we are actually doing, we are forcing our minds into a certain track of thinking, that kind of follows only one direction. All other directions uh, just get forbidden in our thinking, right? And this is what people generally do in life. They forbid themselves more and more tracks of thinking, and this is what makes personality of a human being. The common way of personality of a human being rising is closing up certain tracks into which the thinking or emotions of the individual could get. So more and more tracks closing, more and more defined personality. Okay, so what I tried to say that the most general view or any general view will necessarily contain things that will contradict any position that you find about the topic because it is the nature of the general view. That is what we have, or many people have forgotten in the modern days. That is the law of the synthesis. We have a thesis, we have an antithesis, and we have to synthesize them to get something reasonable, to get something genuinely, objectively reasonable, or something that is allowed to pretend to be objective, at least by the first gaze. Another thing that we have forgotten, that decent thinking takes time to develop, and that time at which it develops, we have to carry ourselves in our thinking scientifically, which means scientifically doesn't necessarily mean going accord with the science, but it means something much broader. It means allowing ourselves to see all the possible perspectives on things and filtering out those ways of perception that seem the most promising to make reasonable predictions based on already established facts. It is one way to filter out most reasonable ways of perception, but so that we are not allowed to close our minds up to possibilities of interpretation, to possibilities of evolution of certain scenarios or concepts. We are not allowed to close up our mind, but in the modern day and age, the art of the synthesis and the art of awaiting patience seems to be a huge rarity in a lot of minds of people. And that is a sad view, to say the least. Okay, so let me engage with the actual topic. I'm going to talk about what you might call the ideas of the left and the reaction to them from a part of society that does not support them. And you were saying that I'm carefully avoiding, for example, the word right, because the core topic is that those ideas usually are associated with the left. And when someone doesn't support them, it does not mean that they are on the right wing. And yeah, me saying that also doesn't place me automatically within the right, because people, and I'm kind of like um, unhappy that I have to explain that, because that's the most basic application of the art of synthesis and of awaiting patience of mind. Uh, if people don't support some idea, there might be different reasons why they don't support this, right? And especially when I, from the meta view, just am telling someone that not automatically calling some people who are not supporting that idea people from the right wing, that this doesn't place people who do call such people not necessarily that in the right wing. Me telling you that can be based on different reasons. It might be you don't know yet, you can't know it yet. There is a decent reasoning behind it. Uh, and finally, you can just think about how different human beings are, how complex their psychological constitutions are. So the reasons how one might come up with some idea of say or not to say something, to phrase something in one way or in another way, it can happen on a multitude of ways. And to genuinely categorize them, you would have to study all those ways on which it could happen. But you can't study them all, because it's basically in the language of human capabilities and infinity. So it is really weird when something automatically talks about anything, that this can come only from that and that. Of course, at that point, you could make an argument, well, but if you talk about people who are generally, well, there are people with such psychic disorders, they are very, very rare that there were such people history. But well, let's take an example. When you're talking about people who enjoy killing other people, so some psychopaths with a very not just psychopaths, they are psychopaths who are living in our society pretty normally, but those psychopaths that are or that were genuinely experiencing joy by killing other people, and who engaged in that. When I'm talking about that, and you would give that example, wow, would you say about that this doesn't come from a psychical disorder? No, I wouldn't, because all such comparisons have to be viewed with all the factors involved that surround them. First of all, by such an example, when we take people about which we generally agree that they are doing something that is humanly unacceptable uh, in any way, about which like absolute majority would agree. And why would the absolute majority agree? Because is encoded in us psychologically, evolutionarily, biologically, that killing someone, that it is not acceptable. Okay, so here we are talking about very basic triggers that kick in when you bring in this topic. And you should be able to observe this. You should be able to observe that the topic you bring in actually triggers most basic biological reactions in people. Biopsychological, I should call them properly. But yeah, you should notice that. So you can give an example that is on the page of extremal reactions. On the other hand, when such extremal reactions develop in people for concepts that are in itself, or that were in itself not leading to such immediate biopsychological reactions, then in my opinion, it is rather peculiar. I would not say that it is bad or good because I'm not here to give some estimates of what is good or what is bad. Of course, I could list you again, I could name some scenarios in which it could be bad. Maybe, just to know, I could name such scenarios in which it could be good. I'm not sure about that. So, as I told you, I'm not pretending to be neutral. I'm not pretending to be anything. But I just warned you from categorizing what I'm thinking too fast because it's far beyond what you usually hear, probably, as you have already noticed. Yeah, not saying that it is actually necessarily bad, not saying that it's actually necessarily good, but what I have to say, because this is a logical consequence, this can be used if you can, if there are biopsychological reactions developing in people that weren't there before that. And I'm not talking about any particular scenario or any particular um, picture, and I'm not even having any particular picture in mind. It could be right, left, I don't know, something like people, individuals being somehow psychologically unstable in themselves without any identification with anything. So I'm really not having any picture in mind at all. I'm not having hidden hints in what I'm talking about. I'm genuinely considering this general situation that developing biopsychological reactions that weren't there, if they are developing for things for which they weren't there, they might make people more easily manipulated if there are people who know how to channel these biopsychological reactions that have newly developed. And an example for that could be, well, maybe a rather fantastic example could be um, when a lot of people develop a huge biopsychological anxiety reaction to an everyday thing, then showing them this everyday thing could make them anxious and you could more easily manipulate them into experiencing fear. It's a completely fantastic example, but just to give you one. And of course, this also applies to identities, to thinking bad of other people, and things like that. Right. So you see that this talk is going to be very complex and on a lot of structural levels, and there will be a lot going in deeper and deeper on different branches of the talk, referencing to the pieces of the talk itself, because I'd like to show you how complex what many people are actually observing with a kind of, in my opinion, simplistic view. Most people observe controversial things with a kind of simplistic view. And again, I'm talking about most people. I'm not talking about any group. I'm not talking about any particular view on things. I'm not talking about any psychological stance. I'm not taking about any emotional stance, not taking about any moral stance. I'm talking generally about controversial things in general, and I'm talking about people in general that most people, in my opinion, observe them with a simplistic view, which I'm again not calling good or bad for me, because I basing things of me just like every human person actually does, even though they want to be general. Let's be honest that there will be a sense of a person in what they are saying because they just can't control themselves on all levels. So for me, simplistic is rather bad. But that's just because I'm comparing, I'm subconsciously, of course, always comparing uh, what is happening around me with myself. Well, because that is the only source. My subconscious knows that it is the only source that is the immediate source of information about the world to me. Because everything, which information that I perceive actually comes through me, to me. So it is subconsciously given in every person. I'm not an exception, as you probably understand. It is subconsciously given in any person that they know that they are the only primary informational source to them, because, well, everything goes through their eyes, through their mind, through their mind. There is no avoiding it. There can't be any avoiding it. This is, by the way, another reason why it is so objectively so unexpected when people just neglect views of other people and just call those views insubstantial in themselves. Of course, I'm not telling you that there are no insubstantial views. But in every view, at least, you could see where the person coming from with this view emotionally or psychologically. If they had some experiences in life that shaped them like that. So every view tells you a story. Most Even the worst view in the world, even if you go into a prison and you talk to a criminal. Oh, I'm always giving examples of prisons and criminals. Oh, exactly, because it triggers your biopsychological reactions, because you all can understand that. At least that. At least here we have a common denominator. At least here we will understand in ourselves. So why I'm talking about such examples? Well, because that is where we have common ground for understanding, because it triggers the most basic level in us. So that we will certainly understand, and that we will certainly not automatically address to anyone because we understand how bad it is. We will not automatically connect it to anyone, to any group, to anything, except this group is actually doing stuff that I'm talking about. And such historical groups throughout the year, genocides. In history, there were genocides happening, and things like that. So yeah, there are such groups. Yeah, again, genocide, an example that we all can understand, we all can relate directly because this is so bad. I mean, physical genocide. I'm not talking about other kinds of genocides that, of course, persist, but physical genocide, even the most unemotional person, except they have like a disorder or like irregularity. Maybe I shouldn't call it a disorder. Irregularity that they don't experience emotions. Physical genocide, everyone completely immediately understands that is the worst thing, or one of the really worst things. So that's why I'm taking such example. So you go to the prison, you ask the very worst criminal, and we tell you why will we kill, and they are talking about it very casually, and you might think, oh, this is the worst person ever. He can't tell, he can't say anything reasonable. There's no zero information in it. It is just a completely warped person, a person from which you couldn't get anything because it does worst things ever. But if you are actually someone who is trying to get to this harmonizing core of things. You will get from that. You will get from that the brain is wired like that. And this is a piece of information. This is a relevant piece of information. You will get that. There are such studies. People just saw that they might, for example, uh, have this have this center this region in the brain missing that is responsible for empathy with other people completely missing or things like that, right? So it's not like there is zero information in it. And so when a person talks very badly about some people, I don't know, some people who like always have fear, uh, fear before some certain group of people, I don't know, you don't know what they have experienced in their life. So it's not like it is not telling you anything, just to say, well, they are just fucked up, they are just completely insane or something, they can't tell anything reasonable, their life is all shit because we hate a certain kind of people. Of course, this is completely impossible and unacceptable. But that this person is like that can in itself tell you a story. And when two speakers engage in an actual argument and they are not actually hating each other but just presenting their position, even though their position might be completely flawed, but seeing and really understanding, realizing how the other person comes to this flawed position, this gives you a lot. This gives you a lot in terms of harmonization, of potential for harmonization of relationships between people, between groups, between identities, and a lot of potential for harmonization of societal issues. So it is very uh, it is hardly understandable from this general perspective, from the perspective of this general view. It is hardly understandable when people just think, and I emphasize from perspective of this general view, because it is completely understandable. People get emotional, people are in themselves, they have a certain identities that they try to maintain, and they think that it is good maintaining this identity. I mean now identity in sense of personality. I mean, like they identify as a person having certain views. I don't mean anything like identity of them as a being with certain properties. No, I mean now really that they identify with their views in that context, at least. In that context, I mean this identity. So, yeah, it is very unexpected and unexplainable that people from this very general perspective, of course, as I told you, from our more nature, more realistic, more down to earth perspectives, it is completely understandable. People are people, we are all human beings, and human beings are not just always generalistic, cannot be that, and it's maybe for the good of things that we are not that. But from this very generalistic perspective, it is really peculiar when people get shut down when it is just a normal argument, when people don't want to listen to one another, when we are talking about things and actually presenting their positions without insulting the contrary position. And when then one position gets pictured as completely or gets pictured in a mind or gets pictured publicly or whatever positions that are, I'm talking about whatever positions that are, of course, again, biopsychologically, I'm not talking about positions like uh it is normal to go and kill people. I'm not talking about such positions because there are such positions in the world. No, but again, you can bring this up as an argument for my stance being unsustainable, because, well, you are talking to biopsychological takers, and this is a completely different topic. No, I'm talking about positions that don't do that, that do not uh, do not involve any immediate biopsychological triggering, like that someone gets killed or something like that in any way. I'm not talking about that. This is involved, of course, when this is involved in a position that advocates for something like that, of course, this is completely, uh, this is the reaction that must be actually that we are completely averse to this position. But again, here, if you go to the very generalistic point of view, and this is kind of dangerous if you can't kind of understand in yourself, go to even more generalistic point of view, but you'll see in a minute. I'm talking about uh, like we should understand, we should actually be aware, in my opinion, again, I'm comparing to myself, that these things, the are really biopsychological triggers that we avoid death, we avoid healing others, of course, but uh, we should understand that this is given to us a civilization of human beings, that it has evolved in a historical context, and that it is just a derivation from this historical context. This is not to say that the opposite is somehow acceptable in the human sense, but to understand why it is not acceptable to us, this is like the job of generalistic thinkers to engage in this thinking, however averse it might be to themselves. Because if you are trying to harmonize things, which you have to get to the core of things, if you're trying to harmonize things in your mind, if you are trying to get to core of things in your mind, you have to harmonize them on all levels, and so that you have to hear them on all levels, you have to like see that this is just something that evolved in us for the better of the things. But you have to see that in the day and age of stone age people, there was a different perception of all of that. Right, and at this stage when we were like more animal-like biologically, it was a completely different thing, right? So we should understand that those categories in the perspective of the historical evolution through all ages and all stages of the human history, that this perspective changed, that it is not a given thing, right? We should be actually grateful for the stage at which we are now, at least in many regions of the world and many minds of people, that we actually find it completely barbaric to even think of killing being a normal thing. Right? This is just an example to make you alert how generalistic thinking is different. It can't allow itself to be bound by anything. But of course, it bears some dangers, because allowing thinking to be bound by anything, you could go anywhere. And that is why juristic thinkers carry responsibility for whatever they get. So you should not, a person who engages in it should have a very strong sense of either harmony or conscience or whatever, but they should have a certain ground that is above all things, that makes him not get astray, even though they genuinely engage in this kind of thinking that is unbounded by genuinely anything, like morals, like anything at all. But this is the word is they get to see things that are hidden behind the veil of these systems of customary feeling and thinking, of human customary thinking and feeling, or of time according customary thinking and feeling, and so on. So I would like to talk about some things that people seem that people's actions seem to make an impression on me, showing that they don't understand the basics of pluralistic synthetic thinking. Of course, not all people, but a lot of people. Let's put it like that. Like, I'm not sure what it is. Maybe it's limitations of just how we humans perceive and can convey things to others that make me think that people actually do not understand each other properly, even though the signals are pretty clear. The signals of what the contrariant is trying to convey. Maybe they are trying to win the crowd for their side without thinking about what they are actually talking about. So their goal is to win the crowd, and it doesn't. The truth of the matter, the systematic, generalistic truth of the matter that doesn't shy away from any perspective at all, that evaluates every perspective and mm, weighs it against other things, that this just isn't uh, a thing they are interested in. Sometimes I just get this and other perceptions. Of course, it's just my perceptions, and I admit to it that it is my perceptions, and I expect from anyone that when they are see that something is just their perception, that they admit to it, that they don't hold it a fact. It is a their perception, is not like a fact. A fact is a different thing. Maybe there are no facts at all. Maybe there are only perceptions. This also could be. My perception might be different. The consensus might be different, but there might be only perceptions and no facts. Maybe it's a little bit of a philosophical question that we could answer that way, one way or another. But yeah, that could also be. So admitting that something is just because you think that is. It is for you like that because you think that it is like that is the most natural thing in the world. And when you are not talking about yourself, and maybe when you're talking about yourself in more, when I recall my own dialogues with myself, but when you are not talking about yourself, but talking about such a big thing as society, or you are talking about, I don't know, some controversial topic, then thinking that your perspective is the final measure of things is just so peculiar. I cannot understand that. I cannot comprehend this kind of take. Of course, I can picture and model how it rises because a human being is generally caught in their own perception scheme, and with that is just one model, one possible model. There are multiple models that I could develop. This is one model, and I'm just presenting one of the models. They're caught in this perception scheme, and with time, their consciousness just get trained and get trained to perceive this perception bubble as their reality. And this applies more to some things by some people, by other people, it applies more to other things. I mean, by things, the kind of things, right, of things of that kind to things of that kind. I mean, like a qualitative kind of things, right? And yeah, that is how it arises. So this is one way how it could arise. Of course, there are multiple factors, but I just like to picture the structure. Of course, I can say, I can draw models how it arises, no problem with that. But I cannot comprehend that, let's say, with my cognitive feeling of how it should be. But again, it's just my own projection. I'm projecting myself on others just subconsciously, just like probably every human being does, more or less. This is the most natural thing to do. But I'm actually not saying that every human being does. It would appear natural to me that every human being does, but again, it might be based off myself. So I'm not saying that. Yeah, I just cannot comprehend that. Or I perceive what is happening in me then, that I just cannot comprehend that. When a position gets renounced, then there is solid reasoning. And I mean every position, in every argument, when there is some solid points involved in it. And I really mean to make you understand that it is hardly possible that I am actually biased when I look at all things simultaneously, genuinely, and am trying to engage in such a lookup that, of course, there are like debates where both sides have their points about every topic. So it's not really about the topics, it's more like about how if people are able to get to the core of thing. Because if there is controversial topic, it is controversial not for nothing. There are like lots of people on one side and on the other side. Then the one side would have those lots of people not for nothing. Right? Of course, again, you might bring up things like, oh, there are people on the side of people who think that killing is completely normal or things like that. Yes, of course, you would be right. But again, you are talking about biopsychological triggers, and you're talking about people who are kind of going against this biopsychological understanding. But of course, there could be perfectly valid reasons also for that. For example, they are with their minds, not saying that their minds are underdeveloped, but saying that their minds are just maybe have culturally developed like that. It's just an example. Culturally developed like that. Like killing of people is normal or something. I'm not talking about any culture at all, but let's imagine some kind of region. Or let's take something like aborigines in some woods, like that they are just on this stage, right? But okay, I didn't want to talk about that because that would probably be underdeveloped from our perspective, but this is just the normal thing to them, right? But now another criminal uh, or a family that has a criminal history and things like that. And of course, children raised in this atmosphere might think that it is normal because this is what their parents were doing and things like that. So, what I'm saying, such things could arise. But okay, I probably took examples that don't show that it can normally arise. And yeah, I would think that it normally thinking that killing people is normal should not normally arise. And now this is a biopsychological thing. So people who think that actually go against this biopsychological thing. But okay, take a war. Take a war, of course, I'm switching a context. War is a different thing. But at the war, you just have to kill either to survive or to protect your people close to you, something like that. And then you just learn that it is normal and it stays with you. This is one of the horrors of the war, that you get used that killing people is actually normal. Of course, it doesn't mean that you go and kill people or something, but this is one of the horrors of the war, that it warps your consciousness into this inhuman kind of normality. Yeah, and those people are completely they didn't choose that. This war that imposed that on them, that killing people is normal. And after we gone through the war, this is what they think or feel, even if you don't want to think or feel it after we were forced to do that, right? So that can arise kind of normally in sense that there's no guilt at all on the side of those people. But of course, it's not normal circumstances, but yeah, it can arise. And this is horrible, of course, right? But this can arise. So, but this is a biopsychological thing. In any case, if those people were warped by some extremal situation, or if they were like brought up in this way or anything like that, it is going what those people are in their minds. It is going against our biopsychological triggers, right? And so when a position is there, and a position is there that doesn't try to harm anyone actively or passively, and you just downgrade this position because you perceive that, in your opinion, it harms someone, then it is peculiar. Because you could argue your case. If it harms someone, okay, and argue about that. And this thing like saying, I won't argue my position because it is clear. No, if there are people who like who kind of feel differently, then maybe we all have warped life stories. It is not necessarily their own guilt. Maybe they all have warped life stories. Okay, let's imagine you are completely right. Let's imagine you are completely right, because I could imagine that I have no problem with that at all. Maybe all those people who are contradicting you have warped life stories. And if you would engage with them and would try to really understand where they are coming from and why they are coming from there, you would understand that. And then you might help them heal. This is just one example. And again, I don't care from which side you come. Actually, I have to make a confession. I'm politically rather illiterate, so I don't even know. I have some notions, but those notions are rather unclear. What what those people say, what those people say. So I don't care at all. It's not the core of what I'm saying, because the core of what I'm saying, people should uh, be with each other on a footing where we they try to uh, appreciate each other being there, not necessarily in a explicitly positive way, but in a neutral way, right? Of course, if there are again some people who violently are engaged in some horrible deeds or things like that, of course it's unacceptable. Or people who are um I don't know, mocking others, of course, but there are dumb people in every category, having every stance. To compare to them people who are just genuinely confused, or people who genuinely have their own stance, you can't just discard that. You can't just discard it. There might be people, even though let's assume your whatever your ideas are, if they are not going against immediate biopsychological triggers, like if you are not calling for killing people or something like that. If you have an idea, let's assume you are completely right. I don't care who you are. And this, let's assume that you are right, and this me telling to anyone, this is just this journalistic perspective. I'm not choosing the or anyone. That I'm telling that to anyone and not just to one side. Well, this is the consequence of my journalistic perspective. I don't prefer any of you. Any of you, no matter what opinion you have or whatever kind of thinking you have about a topic. I'm just looking at general things, right? So let's assume you're right and other people are all wrong, but let's think if it is reasonable. Like you are saying that your opinion is right, no matter what opinion it is, you are saying your opinion is right, and you are assuming there cannot exist any person who doesn't have your opinion and is also this word, not contrarily to you, but is also right. It doesn't have to be even contrarian to you if a person having other opinion is right. It might be that they have other opinion and they are just right. But you are actually assuming that you, and maybe also the people who share your opinion, are the smartest people in the world, are people who have accounted for every eventuality, who have calculated through all possible scenarios, and who have the right for ultimate certainty that they are absolutely right. When you are talking about facts, of course, when you are talking about historical facts, for example, that are just there, then you're right that historical facts are there. But interpretation of facts, interpretation and transferring their meaning into reality and things like that, just to stay with the example of historical facts, they can be completely different, and there might be different opinions about how to transform them into reality. It might have their merits, and some might have more merits than others. But to assume that only one opinion is such things that are not just established facts, to assume in any such regard, on any such context, that this opinion is the only right and only possible opinion, is actually to think that you and the people who surround you are the smartest people in the world, are infallible, and things like that, because this is what you're actually assuming. Of course, maybe I'm exaggerating, but it's like you are going this way. If you're really assuming no person at all might have an opinion that would contribute something to my opinion, this is that. This is what you're doing in your actions, right? So, I'm just making a logical case of it, right? So, and what you are doing in your actions, when you are actually, if in your actions you are actually preventing any other person from speaking to you, if you are doing it explicitly or implicitly, just closing your mind up against everything that uh, doesn't go your line, whatever line it might be, then you are doing that. You're doing exactly that in your actions. You are actually implicitly assuming that you are the most smartest person in the world who is completely infallible, who doesn't do mistakes and things like that. And it is peculiar to assume that. And if I'm exaggerating, well, explain to me how this case could differently. You could tell me, well, all people with whom I engage about this topic, they were really stupid. I really saw that. I really saw that their arguments were complete nonsense. That we talked complete nonsense. All the people with whom I engaged. Well, in practically you are doing that. Of course, you might be right. You might be right because it is possible. It is not an impossibility. I'm not talking about an impossibility. It is completely possible. I mean, not necessarily completely, but it is possible. It is a possibility that you are right. Yeah, but it is rather an unlikely possibility, and I think you will grant me that. Whatever opinion you have, that no one could ever contribute to it anything. In some points, it is like a peculiar thing to think, right? Because to me, it would be peculiar. Yeah, when I'm telling myself, sometimes I have moments when I tell myself that, and I kind of know after that I'm deluding myself. And I'm deluding myself on purpose because I just would like to think that. I would like to believe that. And I'm noticing that about me. So it is very peculiar to me when our people seem to not do that. But again, maybe I'm judging our people, not all our people. Again, of course, I'm not generalizing in that sense. But yeah, it seems like that to me, and it makes me genuinely surprised. So I really don't, I really don't understand why people are not looking for ways genuinely to try and incorporate merits of everyone's opinion, to try to search for merits of opinion in every opinion. Because, like, things that are usually brought up, not all of them are meritless, no matter what topic. Again, except for topics that just go against the really basics of how we think about life and what is acceptable, what is unacceptable. But like to translate topics that are not directly touching that to that level, that is also a very peculiar phenomenon that I seem to observe in some people individually or group wise or whatever. Like, yeah, it seems that different people are doing that, and it is peculiar. I would really like people to try to understand each other. Right, and of course I like perceive that also in myself, that things that become essentially, that become of essence of crucial importance to people, like now move also away from those very basic things. I mean that the spectrum gets larger. Okay, we are just being sensibilized by these, by the social life that became more, well, those things kind of in a way moved for a lot of people to another level. A lot of people are not directly confronted with real horrors, let's say. So kind of we are getting more open for other things, we are getting sensibilized for other things, or a lot of people are getting that, right? um yeah, there is this kind of tendency, is this tendency, right? uh I don't know how to evaluate that. On one hand, I see dangers on that of that. On another hand, of course, like being sensibilized for social issues is a good thing. But when the art of synthesis, the art of cooperation with people you disagree with, when it gets lost because of that or under that, then yeah, then this is just plainly wrong. Because, well, to account for interests and for genuine interests of our people, you just have to listen to them. At least you have to listen to them, but actually you have to account for their needs and their emotional state also. So you cannot just forget any people based on anything. Basically, you cannot forget any people. And I mean, really, any people, everyone in this society, no matter who they are, you cannot forget them. All right. And you cannot just make some people um, enjoy something at expense of other people. And I'm not talking about something concretely, I am talking about exactly this case when that happens. And it's no matter what way you rotate it or what way you make it point toward, it is just wrong. When there are injustices, they have to be, injustices that really harm people, like injustices. Why I clarify that? Because injustice is such a word that everyone could use for themselves. This is certainly not a good thing, because what is justice? You ask one person, they tell you that. You ask another person, they tell you that. And some people will tell you things that you wouldn't like to hear about justice. And of course, you could phrase that about any word in general, about a lot of words, but justice is a word that is, in my opinion, most suitable for that, because there was also justice, like if we killed someone, we have to kill someone too, right? Eye for an eye, for example. Historically, there were all kinds of justice. So this is a word that can be used for a lot of things. That lends itself to be used for a lot of things. So I'm talking about justice when it is really about people getting harmed. Of course, like uh, alleviating or eliminating such injustices that harm people is crucial, is absolutely crucial. But then, when it is about eliminating such injustices, it is not about creating new injustices and about creating new injustices that harm people. And I'm talking about exactly such injustices. I'm not talking about something concrete, because I'm talking exactly about the meaning of my words, not about anything else. This is the generalistic point of view. You might always associate something to something. I'm not doing that, because I'm above that in a sense. My point of view is automatically above that. This is how I think. When I'm talking about this thing, I'm talking about the meaning of this thing. Right? So when I talk about creating new injustice, I mean creating new injustice. I don't have anything in mind to think of. I'm really talking about the meaning of this creating new injustices. I'm not hiding any meaning in that. In any way, for anyone at all, creating new injustice. And that you might project, because I also can project your projections and can map them in front of me, just basing that on the views that I observe in people, that some people of some group would rather think of that, some people of some group would rather think of that. This is your projections. I'm not saying anything, and I genuinely do not intend to mean anything hidden. So if you put it into that, you are doing that. I'm not doing that at all, and I would not like you to do that. Instead, look at things and see where there are injustices that genuinely harm people, no matter whom they harm. If they are such in a certain case, if they aren't such in a certain case, you should look for that. Because I'm only providing the journalistic perspective. I'm not judging, because I know that judgment is in the eye of the beholder. This is just how things are. Humans are all subjective, except when it's about facts, and immediate facts. Like I stated multiple times, immediate facts are something different than transferring something, meaning, interpreting something, and things like that. Okay, or in a lot of cases, it is two different things. Okay, so not creating new injustice and eliminating the injustices that persist, and this is in both cases when they harm people. When they harm people could be conceived differently. Of course, again, it is in the eye of the beholder. What is harm? But I'm trying to make those points so that you understand your constraints a little bit. You understand from where they're coming. I am genuinely trying to make you understand each other, or more like I'm trying to make you see why the pursuit of doing that is worth it. This is the only thing I'm trying to do, because I don't like this kind of uh, whether it is in mind of people or whether it is cultural thing or whatever it is. I don't like this idea of priority opinion or anything like that, no matter where it is exhibited, if in a small group, in a large group, no matter what opinion. I just don't like that. I don't like that historically. I don't like that in the modern day and age. I don't like it in one region or in other region, even if those regions have completely contrary opinions, because I am a generalist. I'm talking about the general schemes and structures of things. And when I say that I don't like that, I'm talking about exactly that meaning. I'm not talking about anything in particular again. And that I'm emphasizing it doesn't mean that I talk about something in particular and I'm trying to hide it or anything like that. It's just that, as I told you, I can project your minds, or I can project the minds of people that I think of, that most people are as they occur to me, observing their behavior by genuinely trying to understand them. I just understand how they might project my thoughts onto their associations, and so I'm trying to prevent those projections, or at least sensibilize you for the possibility that it might be that I'm not projecting to anything, and it might be because, well, you never know, I never know, but this is my genuine opinion that I'm not, that I'm really pretty neutral to the very core of everything, actually. Yeah, okay. I think that suffices. I have talk about some issues, and I think that suffices. Okay, that's it.